Venom is the first standalone movie to feature the Marvel character Venom. Venom is played by Tom Hardy in this movie, and it's the first movie to feature Venom since Spider-Man 3. I was really excited going into this movie. I am a huge Spider-Man fan. Venom is one of my favorite Spider-Man supervillains, if not my favorite Spider-Man supervillain. I love his character, I love his ruthlessness, I love how he's essentially an anti-Spider-Man, but I've also always loved the dynamic between him and Spider-Man, and the fact that because Venom is at times more of an anti-hero than he is a supervillain, there have been times that he and Spider-Man have been forced to work together. It's created a lot of different dynamics in the comics, and that's something I always really appreciated with his character. But like most people, I was really not a fan of Topher Grace as Venom in Spider-Man 3. I thought he was very badly miscast for that role, so I was very interested in seeing how Tom Hardy would do in this Venom standalone movie. I thought Tom Hardy was a much better choice for it, so I had a lot of confidence going in here. I will say though, as months went on and as the movie got closer, I started to lose some confidence in this movie. I wasn't a fan that the movie was not rated R and instead was rated PG-13. I wasn't a fan of some of the stuff the trailer was giving away. I felt the trailer was showing too much. I still went in Venom with an open mind. I still went into Venom thinking, alright, I think this is going to be a really solid movie. And I gotta tell you guys, I was tremendously let down by this movie. Getting right into Tom Hardy as Eddie Brock. I think Tom Hardy does a good job in this movie. I really bought him as Eddie Brock, as this journalist. Because what I immediately appreciate seeing with Eddie Brock is how committed he is to his job. He's a journalist, but he's not someone who's afraid to ask the tough questions, ask the difficult questions that some journalists may be like, I'm not gonna ask that because that's not entirely socially acceptable. When he does research into a story and he hears something and he believes it, he's going to do everything he can to get proof that it is real. At one point, he's called in to review Carlton Drake, who's the CEO of a bioengineering company, and he's been hearing rumors that he's been doing human experimentation. And, you know, as a reporter, he's asking Carlton Drake a lot of questions that are making Carlton Drake a little uncomfortable because you can see he's really digging for that information, and eventually, Eddie Brock is just forced to leave the building. But it's because he was asking some of those really tough questions, which his boss told him not to do. Eddie Brock is now fired. And also because he went into some of his fiance's papers, who's played by Michelle Williams, because she runs a law company that represents the bioengineering company. He finds some information that leads to him presumably thinking that Carlton Drake is in fact doing human experimentation. So he reveals that in the interview with Carlton Drake. And because now everyone believes Michelle Williams gave Eddie Brock that information, she's let go from her job. Now she's pissed off at Eddie Brock, calls off the engagement. Now Eddie Brock's basically at his lowest low. I gotta be honest with you guys, that right there is pretty much the entire first half of the movie summed up in... How long did that take me? About 2 minutes? Not even? The problem is the first half of this movie is dragged out for so long, it's just so fucking boring. And honestly, I think part of that is because Tom Hardy as Eddie Brock, that's really the only character I give a shit for. Getting into Riz Ahmed as Carlton Drake. He's supposed to be the villain of this movie. I didn't buy him as a villain. He's just this very generic businessman who's out to accomplish what he wants to accomplish. He wants to bind these symbiotes to these humans as a way to make human life last longer, essentially evolve human life. And sure, yeah, he has no problem sacrificing humans in these trials, but really, there's nothing about him that was menacing, nothing about him that was intimidating, nothing about him that was memorable. He's just a bad guy doing bad guy things. You're just like, alright, I mean, you're clearly the antagonist, so I have to root against you. But there's nothing about him that's worth remembering. I mean, what's the biggest flaw that most fans have with most MCU movies? The villains aren't that memorable. This is the case right here, and this isn't even an MCU movie. In fact, I would go so far to say that Carlton Drake is probably worse than some of the worst MCU villains we've gotten. That's not good. Soon enough down the line, one of the doctors who works for Carlton Drake, she's aware of what Carlton Drake is actually doing. She feels he needs to be exposed for what he is doing. So she goes and finds Eddie Brock and she's like, hey, I can give you the actual legitimate proof that you need to expose him. It should get you back into reported business. Maybe it can help you fix your things with your fiance. Trust me on this. So as a result, he goes with her to the building, they do a little more research, and it's here he gets possessed by one of the symbiotes. Now it's right here, Eddie Brock starts experiencing very strange symptoms. He is always hungry, he's got this voice in his head that's frequently talking to him that no one else around him can hear, only he can. And finally it reaches a point where Carlton Drake discovers that he was possessed by the symbiote and he is the only one who has survived this mutation that they know of, so he sends his entire team to go after Eddie Brock, to bring him back, to do further experimentation. Now this right here for me is when the movie did in fact start to pick up, because once the guys come to try to take Eddie away, the symbiote starts taking control of his body, he starts fighting off these guys against his will, you know, he's shooting out these not necessarily web, but the symbiote's just shooting out this black oozy stuff at everyone. He's all like, what the fuck's happening to me? And soon enough, it seems like Eddie Brock has been caught, but at that point, the symbiote fully takes over his body, and you see Venom, and he's prepared to eat this guy. But, you know, Venom has to keep running because everyone's coming after him, and it's at this point he takes out a few more security guards. He eats a couple by just biting their heads off. That's really the issue that I have. When Venom does in fact eat people, you don't really see it happen. You see him going in to bite their heads off, you hear it happening, and you know, he's just throwing away their headless bodies, but you don't see anything. And that's one of the fears I had with this movie going into it, is the fact that it's rated PG-13 and not R. From what I know of Venom, from what I have read in some comic books, Venom is an extremely dark character. His stories are violent, they are gory, and they honestly do care a little bit towards the sides of being horrific. You look at a Venom comic and you're gonna think to yourself, if this is gonna be in a movie, it needs to be rated R if it's gonna be done justice. The fact that this movie is not rated R, it really loses some of the magic that it could have had here. You don't really ever grasp the brutality of the Venom symbiote. You don't really grasp the horrific nature that Eddie Brock is going through. I do understand to a degree why they had to make Venom PG-13, because I know along the way Sony probably wants to put Tom Holland and Tom Hardy in a movie together so they can have like a Spider-Man versus Venom movie or whatever, so they had to make this PG-13 so kids will understand who Venom is. But at the same time, it has me looking at the movie like it's wasted potential. Soon enough at this point, the Venom symbiote exposes itself to Eddie Brock, essentially explains what it is and what its purpose is. And it's right here we discovered that apparently the symbiote's purpose is to come to Earth to possess the human beings and then eventually just devour them. And you know, the symbiote is telling Eddie, it's like, you have to cooperate with me and maybe you'll survive this. And so from this point forward, we get into the one thing in this movie that I actually did love, and that is the relationship between Eddie Brock and Venom, essentially. I love the conversation that Eddie and Venom have together. I love seeing the way Venom tries to help Eddie. You know, Eddie discovering what he essentially can do now with this new power. You do buy a bit of a bromance brewing between the symbiote and Eddie, and it's interesting. It actually leads to a couple funny lines in particular. There's one in particular that actually had me laughing pretty hard. Eddie's in this building because that's where they had to go to elude all the SWAT members. You know, he's thinking about jumping through the window and you hear the Venom voice telling him, jump! And then in the very next scene, Eddie's going into the elevator and you hear the Venom voice tell him, pussy. I actually thought that moment was pretty funny. I can't deny that. And I'll say, there's even a moment when Eddie's finally talking to his fiance again. The Venom symbiote is telling him, it's like, you know, you should apologize to her. You may not get a chance to later. And you know, it's a really heartfelt moment. Eddie finally fesses up and he says, you know what? I'm sorry for what I did. What I did was wrong. I'm sorry. But what I didn't like, though, is this is supposed to be a very touching, heartfelt, dramatic, just sweet moment, you know, that actually gets you the feels going a little bit. But then, right at the end of that scene, you hear the Venom symbiote go, oh, that's nice. It's just like, alright, well, that kind of killed the moment right there. I get the movie was trying to go for the humorous tone right there, but it brings a tonal inconsistency to the scene. It's like, when you want to be dramatic, just stick at being dramatic. If you want to be funny, stick at being funny. Don't throw a polar opposite moment in there, because it's just going to kill the mood entirely. Later on, though, Eddie is placed in the MRI because, obviously, his fiancée being concerned about him, not really knowing what's happening. She needs to figure out what is wrong with him. The MRI, however, produces very powerful sound waves, which is, of course, Venom's weakness, or rather the symbiote's weakness. So, as a result of that, the symbiote becomes detached from Eddie Brock. He gets removed from it. And now, once again, Carlton Drake has sent his men after him. Now they capture him because, you know, without the symbiote, he can't fight back against these guys. Except at this point, Drake gets possessed by another symbiote known as Riot. It's apparently the leader of the symbiotes that have come to Earth, and it's convinced Drake to go to the space probe to collect more symbiotes, bring them to Earth to essentially, you know, end human life. I will say, seeing Riot possessing Drake, this was interesting to see. I mean, you could see Riot is a really powerful symbiote, just, you know, turns its hands into scythes or knives and just kills everything that gets in its way. And Eddie and Venom know the only way they're gonna stop Drake is if they get reunited, so in order for that to happen, Venom essentially possesses Eddie Brock's fiance's body, and she passes the symbiote back over to Eddie Brock by making out with him in her Venom form. I understand that's probably a fantasy for some nerds with weird fetishes, but I saw it happening on screen. I'm just like, nope, not doing it for me. So now Eddie and Venom, they go after Drake and Riot. They gotta stop them, and at this point, the Venom symbiote's even revealed to Eddie. It's like, you know what, I want to help because I've grown to like this planet. So now Riot and Venom, they throw down together, and how is this final fight? It's honestly a big CGI fest with a bunch of shaky cam. It's really not that exciting or great of a fight. So they had their big fight. Eddie and Venom were able to destroy the rocket along with Riot and Drake, so now that's all saved. Eddie and his fiance, they start to patch things up a little bit more. You know, she believes that he's no longer bonded to Venom, but he secretly is. And now he and Venom agreed that even though they can now do whatever they want, they should serve their purpose by stopping criminals by killing them, so you know, the Venom symbiote can have something to eat. We do get a mid-credit scene though, and I do want to talk about this because I really did like this mid-credit scene, or rather what it could mean for later. Eddie Brock is back to working as a reporter, and he's interviewing a serial killer named Cletus Cassidy, who's played by Woody Harrelson. They have a very brief conversation, and then Cassidy reveals to Brock, he says, "When I get out of here, there's gonna be carnage." And that's when everyone was like, oh shit, so that's Carnage, because everyone thought Riot was gonna be Carnage, but no, Woody Harrelson is going to be Carnage. That right there, I'm very interested in seeing. Carnage is known as the most ruthless of the symbiotes, the most evil among them, the most vicious among them, and that's why it's bonded to Cletus Cassidy, because Cletus Cassidy is a serial killer. I think that could make for a great Venom sequel, if it is done right. I do feel if they're going to make a Venom sequel that's going to involve Carnage, that one really needs to be rated R. Because as I mentioned earlier, you think Venom is ruthless and brutal and bloodthirsty. Carnage is that on steroids. Because really, Sony, there's no reason for you to not make the Venom sequel rated R. You made this Venom movie PG-13, now you can put him and Spider-Man in a movie together, kids will know who Venom is. Now make the Venom sequel rated R. Do this one justice. You can't fuck it up with Carnage. So all in all, you guys, I really did not like Venom. Tom Hardy does a good job in this movie as both Eddie Brock and Venom. I did really love the relationship between Eddie Brock and Venom. It provided some good moments, some funny moments. Some of the action when it goes down is entertaining, particularly when it's Eddie Brock discovering the powers he has with the symbiote bonded to him. Unfortunately, that's really all I can say for this movie in terms of positives. Carlton Drake was really not a memorable villain for this movie, even after he got bonded to Riot. I didn't think that helped. I didn't care for any of the other characters in this movie. I didn't care for Eddie Brock's relationship with his fiance. I feel like that should have been important. The violence in this movie really isn't entertaining, and it should be because it's Venom, but I really feel the fact that this movie was PG-13 really held the movie back on what it could do and what it could be. It just feels like a lot of wasted potential. The movie takes forever to get going, and even by the time it finally does and you see Venom, what's unfortunate is there's not really a whole lot that's new that you see with Venom, because I feel like most that you saw with Venom was revealed in the final trailer for the movie. Kind of makes me feel the movie should have just stopped at the first two trailers they had, where, you know, you briefly see the symbiote crawling up Eddie Brock's neck, and then in the other trailer you just get a brief shot of Venom at the very end of it. No, they had to release a third trailer, which essentially gave away every scene that we got with Venom. Most of it, anyway. I know people will say, well then just don't watch the final trailer. That's impossible. Do you know how often I go to the movies and how often I see trailers? It's just not gonna happen. In the end, this movie really let me down, and this definitely was not the Venom movie that I was hoping we would get. So that's all I gotta say, guys. Thank you so much for watching my video. Don't forget to leave a comment, like, subscribe, and I will see you all next time.